Hey there and welcome back to another Daredevil video. And today we're going to be talking about the latest episode to drop, Sic Semper Systema, which follows off from that huge cliffhanger ending of episode 3 where Hector Ayala, who'd only just gotten off a murder charge, was murdered by what was likely a corrupt cop cosplaying as Punisher. My god, this show's been a revelation for me. It has well and truly sucked me back into the world of Marvel. I'm loving the bleak, street-level feeling this is bringing, and the slow burn, psychological stuff too. This show is really goated for me. More of this kind of stuff, please and thank you. Anyway, with all that being said, it's time to jump into the episode. We start off at the morgue, getting right into the drama. The coroner, or at least I think that's a coroner, packs up Hector's suit and amulet. They really hone in on that amulet. I feel as if there's going to be a new White Tiger sooner rather than later, won't there? I mean, it would be a shame not to. We didn't even really get to see what that amulet does or how strong it makes the wearer. Matt speaks to the guy and seems rather upset, as it's clear that Hector was executed, but they never recovered a bullet, which has Matt calling BS. Hector's niece appears and wants to see him, but Matt manages to talk her out of it, telling her to remember him the way that he was, instead of seeing his corpse with a massive bullet hole through his skull. It's probably for the best. We then get a really powerful scene where she breaks down to Matt and cries about how the city's full of injustice and that there's nobody that cares enough to do anything about it. Matt tells her that they have to believe that there's somebody out there that would be willing to do something. Of course, this very much feels like that first crack in the facade I was talking about previously, where he's really doubting whether he's making the right choice to step away from being Daredevil, as it's clear the system is still broken, that nobody's out there to help, and nobody's standing up for the little guy anymore. The only person who was just got whacked. It's a great opening scene with some great acting. The girl playing Angela was really great, and I'm curious as to whether she takes up the mantle at some point like in the comics. Does she become White Tiger? Do they recast? I'm intrigued. Based on this scene though, I think there's a good chance she does. Maybe next season? On top of that, I really love how much depth Matt's character has. He's so kind and compassionate in this scene, even as you can tell that through his words and body language, he too is going through the same doubts and inner turmoil about what's happened. Great stuff. We then briefly get a look at new villain Muse, who in the comics I'm pretty sure is a complete freak who uses corpses and blood as art projects. This is another thing I'm enjoying about the show. The promise of some horrific villains. So many of Marvel's villains we see on screen are just your typical beat-em-up supervillains. More about powers and science and magic. Here we get some actual dark, unhinged type of characters. Stuff you'd expect in a Batman movie or something like that. Who do we reckon's going to truly draw Daredevil back in, by the way? Who's his first target? Is it going to be this guy? Seems like he's going to do some pretty horrific things, and I'm also fairly confident this is the guy that approached Heather back at her book signing event. So surely that's not going to bode well. So will it be Muse? Or will it be old reliable Fisk? Maybe neither. Maybe just a general sense of injustice does it. I guess we'll have to wait and see. We then cut over to Daniel and BB who are out clubbing, and Daniel's trying to call it a night, but BB and another friend are trying to pressure him into staying out. He says no, but not before he goes on a brief rant about how awesome it is to work for Fisk, and accidentally leaks some confidential information at the same time. Whoops. We also get the setup for Matt's brief storyline with Leroy, who he's called in to represent as a freebie. Before all that though, we have another Fisk therapy session. This one felt a lot more different in tone. This one addresses that Vanessa, whilst Fisk has been gone, had a relationship with a dude named Adam. He wasn't a criminal, or as they say, he wasn't involved in business. It seems he's an artist, and she was attracted to his hands and the way they could create such beautiful art. She goes on to mention her father, and this is when Fisk really took notice. She talks about how he was a drinker and a gambler and would leave for weeks at a time for work, that it ate away at her mother, and over time she lost all respect for her. She didn't want to end up like her, hence why she had the affair to begin with, to prevent herself feeling crushed down beneath it all, to take back the power. She views his absence as the first and an equal betrayal, as he went fully off the grid and never made any contact. It's then mentioned that Vanessa never had a chance to end the affair, and that she hadn't actually spoken to Adam in a while. Fisk mentions that he and Adam had a dialogue, and Fisk had made it clear just how much Vanessa means to him. Neither of them apparently know where Adam is now. Heather doesn't buy that. I don't think Vanessa buys that. Since I remember that Fisk had bloody knuckles in the last couple of episodes, I also don't buy it. I figured the dude was dead though. I think it's clear that Heather also thinks this dude is dead. I mean, look at her face here, jeez. She then speaks to Vanessa alone to ask if Fisk is abusive or anything of the sort, with Vanessa calling her sweet, but reassuring her that she has no reason to fear. I really do wonder where they're going to take this. Clearly Fisk is going to be unveiled as returning to his old ways at some stage of the game. Will she actually care about what he's done to Adam? Will she just be a follower? Will she turn against him? I don't expect her to be a hero or anything, but will she make a move with her new criminal contacts? The show could go in any direction, so I'm rather excited. We then get Matt going to meet his client, Leroy. I was actually rather impressed with this scene. Often in these instances, you're going to find that the client is played up to be sympathetic to the audience. They seem like a really nice guy, they're friendly, they just made a mistake, etc., etc. You often come out of it feeling like justice hasn't been done in any way. I was impressed in this scene that they didn't try to do that. They made it clear this guy's a serial recidivist who rather forcefully demands that Matt get in probation, even if there's absolutely zero chance of that ever happening considering his long string of offences. On top of that, he's constantly ragging on Matt for being blind. What a charmer. It's even worse because Matt's doing this for him for free. Come on, man. Then he goes above and beyond to get this guy only 10 days in lockup. He was staring down the barrel of 35 days, over a month. But through the power of flirting and philosophy, Matt has managed to whittle that down to a little over a week. I think that's damn impressive. Watch him talk shit afterwards though. Next up, Matt can't help but confront Officer Pal when he happens to run across him. He can't stop himself from accusing him of killing Hector, or at the very least being involved in the murder. Pal tries to deny it, and when Matt listens to his heartbeat, I'm pretty sure it's meant to come across that this guy's telling the truth. It makes me think that in all likelihood, at best this guy's a minor foot soldier in whatever corruption's going down. He's probably just corrupted on the take, and was willing to silence that witness to get the guy he blamed for his partner's death put in prison, not anything beyond that. Interesting. I wonder if we've actually met this killer before, or if he's going to be some nameless, faceless goon. Won't take too long to find out, I reckon. Also the balls on this guy, after being destroyed by Matt and then outplayed in court, to think that anybody's going to take him seriously if he accused this blind man of beating him and another cop up when they came to silence a witness. Empty threat in that regard. Although I suppose they could try to send some fellas out to silence him. If they can kill Ayala, who actually had powers with the amulet, they probably think they could beat this guy with the right numbers. And with guns. Still, pretty big talk coming from Pal. I still hope he gets more of a whooping, or runs into Punisher. We then move on to Fisk's latest scheme. He wants to revitalise the Red Hook port. Here we see that Fisk is already starting to shift who he listens to. Since Daniel's been such a yes man who simply agrees that Fisk should do whatever he wants with no real pushback at all, no critique, no alternate opinions, just a yes man, he's getting more prominence. Meanwhile, Sheila thinks that whilst his plans to rebuild the port is a worthy goal, it's not something feasible at this time. They need to get council approval to conduct a feasibility study and zoning laws, etc., etc. All the red tape. But to get the council approval, they need the public advocate to put it on the docket, to do the first step in what is a very long process. So he ends up going with what she says, but it feels like he's getting frustrated with all the red tape and her constantly telling him what he can't do. I'm curious as to how long she's going to last in this job, to be honest. It does feel like she has a clear expiration date, and that's when he starts to be more of a criminal again. Meanwhile, Buck tells him after the other two leave that gang violence is getting out of control. Since this is one of the concerns that the public has about the area, it needs to be dealt with sooner rather than later. So here, just like Matt, we can see Wilson being pulled back into the old lifestyle, with the idea that being Kingpin would allow him to more easily pursue his goals, to achieve his political agenda. We cut back to Matt, who's talking to Leroy again, telling him that he has a 10-day sentence, which in Matt's eyes is a triumph. Not to Leroy though. Here is where that penny drops, where they take a character who on the surface seems very deeply unlikable. A recidivist criminal who mocks Matt for being disabled and demands the impossible, on top of being ungrateful for having a 10-day sentence, of which he's only going to serve 7, but more like 6 because they're including this day which he spent waiting for his sentence. So you have every reason to think, screw this guy. Only when he goes into it all, you start to feel sorry for him, because you realise he's on benefits and can barely afford to eat on a good day. That locking him up costs so much more than what they give him in benefits, and yet they refuse to increase them. That he lives a life of begging for change and dumpster diving. He never has any sort of luxuries. That the last time he was locked up, they cut his benefits and left him starving. It's a very depressing and dystopian look at the world. You can see why he keeps falling back into crime. And I just felt like his character was very cleverly handled. Because even if you don't like him now, you can see why he is the way he is. Then we come into a heavy but also hilarious scene. Fisk is taken to a school where he has to listen to a rendition of "We Built This City on Rock and Roll." He's clearly hating his life, but he has to put on a big smile for the kids and gives them a big standing ovation after they're done. That clapping is definitely memeable. And then he immediately makes a run for it before they can bombard him with a second terrible song. In the meantime, it comes out that BB very much screwed Daniel over by writing an inflammatory article about what Fisk was planning to do with the recycling and his way to circumvent the union. Whoops, brutal. Of course, Wilson's told and he's angry, but he has no chance to dig deeper because he goes to the Latvian Cultural Centre and is once again forced to listen to "We Built This City on Rock and Roll." Now in Latvian. This was a very funny sequence. I enjoy when the MCU has this sort of humour. Often it's rather sharp and quippy, But this was just a classic, well-constructed joke with a solid build. Variety's the spice of life, after all. Then it's over to the office where Fisk is raging at his staff, determined to find the leak. Daniel, to his credit, instantly owns up to his mistake, and that's what I like about his character. It would be so easy to portray him as a cutthroat schmoozer who's out to get ahead and is trying to get as much power as possible just for himself. Instead, he's very sincere and clearly looks up to both Fisk and Sheila and is willing to do anything to make it right. He's a very different sort of character to what we've seen before. I wonder if the devotion is ever going to cease, or if he's going to be ride or die for him forever. I mean, Fisk could be beating him to death and he'd still probably be saying, "Oh, thanks for this, thanks for the opportunity." He rambles on and on about how much he loves Fisk and how no matter what, he'll always be loyal, even if he decides to fire him and blacklist him from everywhere. I think this is what gets through to Fisk, though. He recognizes that this kid's made a mistake and that it was very gutsy for him to own up to the truth. He also recognizes that he's an eternal yes man and very loyal, so he keeps him around with no punishment. I mean, he does straight up tell him to his face he will kill him if he ever does this again, though. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if Fisk kills this guy someday. It's either that or he eventually replaces Sheila, who I do think is going to be fired at some point, even if right now she's back on top of the mountain because Daniel's in disgrace for the time being. Also, surely he's going to cut off BB forever at this point. I know he seems to be a very happy, friendly guy, but no chance he should keep up the friendship after this. She did screw him over quite hard. Back to Matt. The murder of Hector is still not sitting easy with him, and so he goes to the scene of the crime to try to find the bullet. Man, this detective stuff, it never gets old to me. I find it so interesting. He hears a coin get knocked by a motorbike and it rolls down a hill. He then rolls a little glass bottle the same way and follows it to a little storm drain in which he finds the bullet. This in turn leads him to wherever it is that Punish is hiding out, and we get a truly amazing scene. In essence, it feels like this scene is Matt projecting onto Frank. He says that Frank could be out there being a hero, but he isn't. He doesn't use his skills for good. Pretty much just having that internal dialogue with himself about why he should be Daredevil again, but using Frank as proxy. It felt to me that he went to Frank not because he was seeking permission like Frank seems to think, but because he knows that Frank isn't going to sugarcoat anything. He's going to give it to him straight and cut to the heart of the issue with Foggy's death, and how Bullseye is still alive and kicking. Yes, he got a life sentence, but he's still alive, which is more than Foggy ever has. This was by far the most powerful scene of the show so far. These two dudes acted their asses off in an episode filled with amazing acting. Hell yeah, great script too, especially when they mentioned Punisher's son. Just wonderful. Punisher's so awesome. It really does feel like we're coming to the point where Daredevil comes back in a very big way. I can't wait for that moment where the music hits, he's in his suit again, and he's just ready to lay into some bad guys. Hell yeah, I can already see it. It's in my mind's eye. This is followed up with a brief scene that continues to touch on how the relationship dynamic within the Fisk's marriage has changed forever. Vanessa feels safe with him, but she does question whether she should feel frightened. Meanwhile, he tries to get across that he's trying to forgive. He's trying to move on from everything. As this is going on, Matt comes home to Heather, and they have a very cute, very wholesome little scene. My god, we needed this. This has been such a heavy episode. I'll take a wholesome scene where I can find it. I feel like it's only going to keep getting more and more dark, more intense, more bleak the further we go. And this all leads into Matt and Wilson both giving in. They're losing to their true nature. Matt goes up to the roof and looks at all his gear, and he starts honing his Daredevil skills again. He's working to get back into fighting shape. Whilst Wilson, he's getting back into shape too, by eating. Eating what looks to be a truly delicious meal and having a glass of red wine. Guess the diet's over then. Oh, and look, turns out he has had Adam locked up all of this time in his dungeon. Woof! I think we know where the bloody knuckles came from then. Oh, this poor bastard is such a dead man. At the very least, he's gonna get out of there, but his hands are going to have been smashed to a pulp. Then we finish with a very chilling scene of Muse draining some poor bugger's blood. Looks like the pieces are all set though. Fisk, Muse, Daredevil, Punisher, Vanessa, I suspect probably Bullseye too. Something's building and it's all going to explode next episode or the one after, I'd think. And so with all that being said, that's the end of the episode. And these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of this episode? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.